let's just go, as the mentality of today. And yeah, thanks, Jason, for joining us. Long time, mate. It's been a while. Was it 2014? Was We were the first intake of what was then Guru Performance, which is now Institute of Performance Nutrition. You've done a lot
Yeah,
in that time, and you do a lot in the men's space, which is, I wanted to get you on for a catch up anyway, as just like someone I hugely respect in the industry, and on a personal level as well. Is I think I explained the intent of these podcasts, just mates having a chat that people can overhear, which I think is the organic and the enjoyable thing about podcasts. Is if it feels too formal, if it feels too rigid, if it feels like I'm pulling away important things that you're talking about to keep to a set of questions that I'd already formalized, it clunky. I don't enjoy that stuff. So yeah, this is just have a chat, mate.
yeah. So for the record, this is very live. I haven't been sent any questions in advance, unfortunately. So I literally have no idea what Dan's going to say. Anthony said it's going to be extremely controversial.
You look a bit fearful because of that. I feel like you've caveated the
Bringing
whole
me down
podcast.
today. He's putting people on blast today. He's told me, and he's bringing me down with him. So that's the procedure for today.
That's my style. Everyone knows that's my style. I'm that guy. That's what I'm out here doing, stirring up the pot, causing controversy. How are things with you, mate? Because
Oh yeah, before we begin, I had like a question for you.
no, 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 no. Hang on, hang on. That's not
Yeah.
what this is about. Now go on. Yeah, go on.
I've seen you kind of mixing with, the high society of the fitness world. And why was it you wanted to kind of get me on your show to test out this new software?
Well, I'm gonna counter your question with a question.
Got it.
Like high society? I don't really know what that means. I think in terms of how they operate, in terms of like fitness cliques, you sound like you're a bit suspicious about my motives here, Jason, mate.
No, no, no.
I
I'm,
just
no, I'm flattered. No, I mean high society. I'm talking about, you're on, you do a lot of public speaking in the kind of fitness space. It's very impressive. And, like our buddy Tarek, like you mentioned, it's great to see some of the people that we studied with in those kind of early days, go on to, really own their space and, carve out a niche within the industry. And, yeah, I'm really proud of your achievements. And when I
oh
kind of see
man.
you up there on stages, pushing a new, subject matter that's kind of really kind of touched upon, quite an honest, health focused to, health and fitness. And, it's great to see. So, I just was curious as to where you saw my kind of input in that.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate the compliment. I suppose it's serendipity, like a lot of it, and I think often that's a conversation that's kind of missed out of the health space. We have a lot of privilege, we have a lot of luck, and we have a lot of serendipitous just circumstances that come about. So I don't really know what higher society is, but I guess the opportunities to do those things are just, and you know what it's like, and speaking quite candidly, it's often a case in this space of just chucking shit against the wall. And sometimes you're pissing in the wind. You don't know how things are going to land. You don't know how things are going to reach certain people. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily banging on people's doors. I've just opportunities have presented themselves. I like to think I represent myself in a way I want to be represented. I'm myself. I can't be anyone else. And I've fallen into those. I haven't really made a concerted effort to say I want to do this. It's kind of, I've been very fortunate. It's led to those things, and I'm hugely grateful for those opportunities that come up. And to answer your actual question, the reason why I want to chat to you is because you're always someone I've always hugely respected on a professional level, pushing health and well-being as a spectrum that it is, the physical and the mental side of things, but also as a men's health advocate, which much is, and not as a whataboutism, much is spoken to the women's side of things. The plight of women, rightfully so, is spoken about a lot more often, especially in terms of body image and how women are far different to men in many respects, especially when it comes to the menstrual cycle, things like the menopause and how hormonal changes and their ability to do things, and why they might invest in physical activity and being more mindful of nutrition in terms of longevity and not just looking a certain way. But you are putting yourself forward and speaking a lot for men. And, as a man, I hugely respect that. I want to hear more of that. and it's candid conversations with people I respect, and also on a personal level. I feel like we have clicked. We might not speak as often as we do. So yeah, no agenda here, mate. I just, I guess I'm getting people on that I just enjoy chatting to. That I always said that was my agenda with this. So it's not necessarily. I'm not speaking about this instance, by the way. Is if I'm going to get people on to have a discussion, it's always going to be people that I respect on whatever level, even if I don't agree with them on everything, And if hopefully the listeners that have stuck with episodes up until now, as I don't always agree with people and everything, but you can have respectful disagreement on ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to align with people, but this is just a podcast that delves into deeper kind of what people are about, their motives, not necessarily about what they can offer in terms of value all the time, but just because I feel like they've got an interesting story or they've got some interesting life experiences to share with people. So there's no intent here with, I don't just talk about coaching, which is baffling to a lot of people because I know a lot of people in our space, they use that to push their business. Whereas I can comfortably talk about whatever on here. And that, that's the fascinating thing. So I'd love to hear about what you've been up to because you are doing more in the men's space. I know you've been trying to push forwards with more talks yourself. You're doing some work with Third Space at the moment. You're quite a crucial part there. You do, obviously, you've gone on as someone that values higher education as well and invested a lot into yourself. Yeah, so just hearing a bit more about your story, mate. Where did the impetus to get involved in more the higher education end come from initially? Because we both jumped on that course on 2014, the first intake. I don't think either one of us knew what we were getting involved with, but
No.
that opened the door to other opportunities, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you mentioned it earlier. Yeah, opportunities presented themselves, and you and I were both ready to kind of jump on those and see where it took us. Back in 2012, I'd done a UK SCA accreditation. Whilst I kind of learned a lot about kind of programming, the actual application of Olympic lifting with the kind of people I was working with, still working with, had kind of very limited uses. So this kind of idea that I was going to become an S&C coach and become like the man, the complete package. I was kind of left, still wanting at the end of that. And I'd kind of worked, met Laurent Bannock, and he kind of launched this course, the CISSN, the postgrad, and you and I had done that at the University of Westminster, and I thought at the time that nutrition really was going to be the key to kind of being much more effective with the kind of Gen Pop clientele that I was working with, and it was certainly the kind of the weak link in my armor. So that was going to be where I was going to invest my efforts and my focus and my energies. So I did that, and really got a kind of appetite for learning. I left school without two GCSEs to rub together. I had one GCSE in like English or something. Just wasn't really willing to learn or motivated to learn at that age. But as an adult, I was kind of very engaged with kind of learning, and it was challenging. It was a very steep learning curve at that point. The kind of the hardcore biochemistry that we kind of thrown ourselves into. And I remember reading these giant textbooks, and if you'd asked me what was on that page you just read, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And it felt like I was, reading in a foreign language. But surprisingly, it was going in. And I remember that, I remember the point when I was having a conversation with Lauren, and I suddenly started to speak about protein, and it was making sense. And as the words were coming out of my mouth, it was almost like someone else is kind of speaking them. But the dots were beginning to connect. I was beginning to be able to see the angles, and I felt empowered by that experience. An opportunity came up to go from Westminster University to now go to Middlesex University and do a master's. So we were there, all looking for, our kind of thesis subject, the stuff we were kind of passionate about, that we were going to, research and study. And my area was kind of testosterone. And I suppose that's kind of, partly why, we can have a good conversation about kind of men's health and how that relates to men's health, in the podcast today. So what I studied there for 2 years was the effect of training and nutrition and recovery on testosterone in middle-aged men, the natural production of testosterone in middle-aged men. Now, this was a master's in sport and exercise science. However, and I kept having to be kind of brought back on, back on beam, as it were. I kind of found that, testosterone actually beyond the sporting benefits, building muscle, aggression, competitiveness, reduction in kind of fat storage, the kind of physical benefits, the kind of the mental and the cognitive benefits and the well-being benefits, I found almost equally as interesting. So it kind of opened up the space, or opened up the focus in terms of just the physical health of an individual, of a man, but also applies to women, and opens it up to kind of looking at the kind of the mental health of an individual as well. So I studied that for a couple of years, and really enjoyed the experience. At the end of it, I went from a man with barely educated to becoming a master of science. And sorry.
Pretty bloody impressive. I think that speaks to, I guess like the archetype structure of how schooling system is if you can capture someone's attention and really engage them in something they want to learn about, that's going to bring out the best in everyone. But I always think it's quite baffling. If you look at the school model, it's the same. It's been the same model for hundreds of years. I don't know about you. I haven't used Pythagoras theory of any time recently, but I could probably do with some tips on my tax and when it comes to balance sheets and things like that. But real life skills. I always think like emotional regulation would be great for kids to learn, because that's something I didn't learn until I was probably 30.
I was looking at doing some research for my doctorate that I'm now doing at Birmingham University, which is a top 6 uni in the UK for sports science, and looking at the effect of Q training in schools and how that raises grades by about 11% when you take students through that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, where I'm currently at in my education is looking at education and how we can kind of change that to kind of improve the effectiveness of the skills. And maybe we can kind of get into it later on in the conversation. But as an industry, we are, and it's very logical. I understand why we focus on the hard technical skills. Let's learn about anatomy, let's learn about biomechanics, let's learn about biochemistry, nutrition, all that kind of stuff. My point is, I think for kind of most trainers working with Gen Pop clients, actually the skills they're missing is communication skills and the soft skills and the interpersonal skills and the coaching skills. And actually, the industry doesn't have a lack of information or a lack of knowledge. Our shortfall is the implementation of the knowledge that we already have. Because for most people that just want to lose weight, you just need to move more and eat less, right? And you can dress that up in any way you want, make it seem more complicated than it actually is. But, trainers know that, clients know that, just for some reason, people are just not doing what they know they need to do. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. But, we're talking about, I guess, men's health and...
Well, I feel that's relevant because I think that's very apt kind of within the conversation, the realms of coaching, especially because it is very rational based. And I guess most of us, when we first get into it, like our start in the industry, I guess, was very similar. I started as a level 2 health and fitness instructor doing health MOTs, wiping sweat off machines, did my PT at uni to earn a bit of money. And then I went on to do my UKSEA and had, like most people do, is you have aspirations on working up and down the country and working with high level athletes. That evolves obviously because rationality aside is we're also emotionally led as creatures. We're social creatures. My bugbear actually, a lot of the coaching seems to be around, like using fat loss as an example. You have fat, you aren't fat. That's cool, but if you're working with someone that has been in a larger body the majority of their life, that logic is null and void because they know that, but that doesn't stop them from feeling a certain way. That doesn't stop the behaviors that have led them there getting in the way. That doesn't change how they think about themselves. So when you scratch beneath the surface, it's so much more than this logical, rational, objective stuff. It's the subjectivity and getting that to stick with that individual, which is so important. And probably what we experienced with a lot of the directive coaching, if you like, and the exercise instruction side of things, is that when we're working with an individual is it's all very well telling someone what to do, but actually understanding their life experiences, the challenges they are going through are totally different. And there was no business acumen kind of advice when we first got in. It was, you do this exercise for this, and this is how you do it in the safest way possible. But we've almost got this, as we tend to, overcorrective pendulum swing. Is it's so business acumen focused, as you say. Like soft skills is the interchangeably used term, but I feel like soft skills doesn't do it justice, because they're hard skills, they're essential life skills. And generally speaking, I think if someone's got the emotional intelligence to be able to communicate with people on their terms, is that sets you one foot ahead of most other people, even if you're working in a corporate environment, because you have a better understanding of yourself, you have a better understanding of other people. And I guess you could probably attest to working with lots of people over the years that academically, objectively, in terms of scientific knowledge, are great practitioners, but how they can communicate with people is a whole different ballgame. And if you can't communicate with people, then your knowledge base is kind of irrelevant in that space.
No, and I think within our industry, within other industries, there are individuals who intuitively have high levels of those skills, emotional intelligence, able to communicate, empathy, being able to motivate individuals, and they prosper as a result of having that skill set. But I think we look at it different in that no one really understands anatomy and biomechanics. They have to kind of, or they do understand it. No one kind of intuitively knows that. They have to kind of learn this stuff and delve into it and research that stuff. And I think we need to be able to apply that same, progressive view to developing those interpersonal skills as well. So you may be an excellent communicator and I may not, but there's no reason why, if I don't apply myself and try and learn and develop those skill sets, I can come up to a kind of, a similar level to you. So it's just, I suppose, growth mindset, that things we think we're, naturally good at or naturally not good at, it's just because we haven't dedicated the time to developing those skills. So I think we just need to kind of shift the focus of the industry, or spread the focus of the industry to, apply those same, learning principles, and, trying to develop in other areas beyond just the kind of very, objective, technical, hard skill set.
I feel that's so important to acknowledge, because my understanding from the reading I've done as well is EQ is, I don't want to say more easily, but is better improved as any kind of skill acquisition than IQ. So, you have people that are naturally, part of their genetic predisposition, quite intelligent. They pick up skills quite easily or pick up information quite easily. But EQ is far more movable. So if you, like any other skill, you apply yourself, you practice it. And often just the art of listening, especially in the kind of the men's space, I think, is men's health and men's mental health especially, is there's often a lot of focus on strength in speaking, but it's who is appropriately equipped with the listening skills. And that in itself is a whole nother skill set. I feel, sorry, just knocked over the mic there. Getting too flamboyant with my hands, you see. If it's okay with you, mate, I want to not jump to, but as a focal point is, because I think it's particularly apt and poignant now, because not that I'm a gatekeeper of celeb news, but I saw Robbie Williams talking quite recently about andropause, going
Yeah,
through
glad you brought this up. Yeah.
going through a big shift at the moment, and rightfully so. There's lots of menopause conversation, because if you know a woman in your life, they are going to categorically 100% going to experience the menopause at some point. Andropause, I feel, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on it, it can be a phrase that's flippantly thrown around, because there is going to be a natural decline in hormonal production as we get older, as men, but the gravity of what people experience and how they experience it is going to be very individual as well. Could you kind of outline it for me, please? For those
Yeah.
people
So
that aren't aware of what
I actually
andropause.
made some notes because I was hoping you were going to kind of bring this up. So I don't know when it was, and at the time I meant to write some kind of post or some response to it. I, thought it was worthy of one, but various papers, such as the Daily Mail, etc., they kind of put this kind of headline, andropause or menopause or something like that, to kind of, deliberately provocative. Men are getting all these kind of, compensations and, allowances as they kind of go through this stage. Isn't it kind of ridiculous? And it triggered a lot of people, people I respect, women in the industry were, I suppose, challenging of the fact that men should be, there should be kind of allowances for men as they kind of go through this age. And I suppose, disputing that, andropause as it being presented was a thing. So whilst you're right, menopause is, a very kind of abrupt process that, where ovaries cease to function, and there's a, dramatic shift in the hormones within a female's body, and various kind of symptoms. But the point I wanted to make was that gender specific health shouldn't be thought of as a kind of zero sum game. So if men receive some kind of attention and some kind of investigation into this kind of area, it doesn't mean that should come at the cost of women. So that's kind of firstly kind of what I wanted to say. The last podcast I was on was a fella that was kind of did a lot of work in the female health space. And it got me on, and I kind of pointed out, I'm not claiming to be any sort of expert on women's health, but I'm a kind of ally, and I kind of understand that there needs to be a gender focused approach at times. Women aren't just small men. But if we look at what andropause is, or testosterone deficiency. Testosterone deficiency can contribute towards depression and has been identified as a significant determinant of suicide risk. And that's from a study, or there's a couple of studies, but one by Scher 10 years ago. So the testosterone deficiency is a significant determinant of suicide risk, right? There's an abrupt rise in testosterone deficiency between the ages of 45 and 50, right? So that's when, there's a kind of marked decline. Whether you say it's a correlation or a causation, but if you look at the Office of National Statistics, the peak suicide rates amongst men are between the ages of 45 and 50, right? So male suicide is problematic. It's the biggest killer of men under the age of 50. There's a peak in male suicide between the ages of 45 and 50. That correlates with when there's an abrupt rise in testosterone deficiency. So for the papers to kind of whip up the public into kind of saying andropause isn't a thing, I think that's, people are clearly talking as usual, without kind of really understanding the facts or at the very least the kind of context behind it. So whilst testosterone deficiency is typically associated with a loss of energy, loss of motivation, sexual dysfunction, inability to focus, mood, depression, and suicide risk are also, a very kind of real thing. So,
sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, because some of the commentary around Robbie Williams, and perhaps we'll delve into it a little bit in terms of body image, but whereas he's been ridiculed in the past due to how much weight he's put on, muscle atrophy being a thing as well, and people are kind of ridiculing him for being quite skinny now, and he attributes a lot of that to his testosterone deficiency.
Yeah, so excuse me. So our hormones, or the sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, play a very significant role in, how we look, right? So when, when teenagers go through puberty, this kind of surge in testosterone, as well as the beards and, the very fine moustache you're sporting there, they put on muscle in kind of male storage patterns. So, large amounts of muscle on the shoulders, back, chest, etc. When that testosterone begins to decline, we find it harder to kind of maintain our levels of muscle mass, and also fat storage increases. Also, if you kind of flip that, and as women go through menopause and their estrogen levels drop, now they have a kind of an imbalance between their estrogen levels and their testosterone levels. So then they begin to store fat in an android pattern rather than the gynoid pattern. So whereas previously in their pre-menopause condition, and they would store fat, on the kind of the hips, the bum, the thighs. As they go through menopause and they have kind of a higher ratio of testosterone, their fat storage patterns begin to kind of mimic more of the male pattern, and that's when women begin to store fat for the first time in, kind of quite a rapid onset around their midsection, and that can be quite distressing and confusing for women. And interestingly, when females that have gone through menopause and are storing a lot of kind of fat around their midsection, when they have HRT, that fat redistributes itself. So they don't lose fat or body weight per se. They don't lose the fat. It just redistributes itself back to where, women are kind of typically, younger women typically store their body fat. But back to Robbie Williams and back to middle-aged men, as we lose testosterone, we lose our ability to maintain muscle mass, and we tend to begin to store more fat as a result.
Yeah, two really poignant things that jumped out at me then. You were talking about just, firstly, I want to kind of just echo what you're saying is I think you can be hugely passionate about multiple different important things in the world. It doesn't make it a whataboutism, because I often find that, if I speak about men's mental health, it's to, well, actually more women attempt suicide. And yeah, that's true. However you want to dub that in air quotations, men tend to be more successful, let's say, for want of a better phrase, following that through. But that's not to say that women don't experience mental health concerns as well. And I think when we're talking about the decline in testosterone production, it doesn't mean we take anything away from talking about the menopause. That's the first thing I kind of want to say, because that is how it tends to be quite combative on social media, especially, I find, is that it's not a great place for nuance. It's not a great place for discussion. And if you're talking about one thing, it must mean you don't care about anything else that's going on in the world, which is just nonsense, right? It's a visual platform. You've got a tiny little caption to talk about one little thing. The other thing that I think you mentioned, which was so important, is the influence on your cognitive capacity for both andropause or the menopause, and that actually a lot of people associate it as just a physical thing, having biological implications on how their bodies present themselves, but how they think about themselves, like being foggy minded, fatigue, generally being more apathetic towards the world, generally being a little bit more less motivated. That has huge implications, and that makes all those different behaviors.
Testosterone's like such a cool hormone. And, when I was kind of reading about it, during my master's, I'd kind of find out all this stuff and I'm like, wow. And, you can make an assumption on its kind of role in this context, but testosterone increases search persistence. So if you are, high levels of testosterone, we're more likely to kind of pursue our goals or pursue, food sources, hunting, than individuals with kind of lower testosterone. And then if you kind of look at that in the kind of, the modern world, there was a really great study done in a London trading desk, in the city, the financial district, and they found that men with higher testosterone and lower cortisol levels made more money than those with the other way around. So they were more inclined to make more confident, bold trades. And then the reverse being true, men with kind of low testosterone and higher kind of cortisol levels, almost had a kind of paranoid, pessimistic kind of view of the markets and were much more timid. So there's that kind of search persistence, our kind of confidence in our actions, and then also, just kind of scanning, trading screens, so looking at kind of numbers, lawyers looking through kind of documents. We become much more kind of focused and diligent, when we have kind of high testosterone levels.
I'd be really interested to see like the parallels in women in those roles as well, like how that differs to norm population. So, women that work in trades, for example, like how proportionately their levels of hormones are different between
Well,
women.
the kind of where this kind of study, the recommendations were talking about the role of women and older men, was that testosterone is, I suppose you could describe it as a dynamic hormone, as it rises and falls based on kind of external and internal variables, factors. So the presence of women in London trading desks or trading desks in financial markets, as well as older men, kind of flattens the kind of surges in hormones. So, if you have lots of, 20, 30-year-old Essex boys like yourself
Easy. I'm definitely not 30 anymore, mate. It's all right. You can go
on a trading desk, things, get a little too exuberant at times.
Lads.
Sorry?
Lads.
Yeah, yeah. So, the kind of recommendations of this study was, you need to kind of have a kind of mix of,
Rambunctious men down.
yeah,
That's hilarious.
undoes itself to a point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess with that shift and this awareness of how crucial these hormones are, is what I've seen. I'm sure you've been witness to it as well. Is I don't know whether it's a certain algorithm that feeds into how old I am now, but it's all for hair transplant, it's for erectile dysfunction and TRT. That's what my time, and I promise audience that is not what I'm searching on the internet, but that's what a lot of the marketing seems to be pitched with. Like, I think I'm quite fortunate in terms of hairline and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's really quite interesting that TRT has become such a focal point, and I'd be keen to get your thoughts on genuine testosterone replacement therapy, much as the same as women might go down the HRT route. And I think I'm trying to think of a more succinct, less mean sounding way of saying it, but essentially guys that just want to justify going on gear and call it TRT, because we saw quite a lot of that in MMA until they brought regulatory bodies in. And I feel, because Brazilian jiu-jitsu is my sport, that is very rife in the world of jiu-jitsu because it's not tested, and you do have men in their late 20s that are conveniently going on TRT. But a lot of I guess the bodybuilding community that I hear speak of it on social media, they're talking about it. They're referring to it as TRT, but it's from a supraphysiological standpoint, which is if you're taking your testosterone levels above your relative normal ranges, is just being assisted. It's not TRT because it's
yeah.
TRT and then some.
Yeah, so I suppose you wanted a certain level of controversy.
No, it's not. I don't think that's controversial.
No, no, no. What I was going to say, I mean, I don't think this is controversial, but kind of my viewpoint on it is, and you can kind of see me, light up when I kind of talk about all these kind of like cool functions that testosterone has. Testosterone, in my view, is like the elixir of youth, right? It's intrinsically linked to kind of youthful masculinity and athleticism. So as men, we should want to keep our levels as kind of robust as we can for as long as we can, right? And that kind of lead to kind of an improvement or a maintenance of a high quality of life. I think there's like a continuum of, well, there is a continuum of kind of treatment in terms of managing or improving your testosterone levels. So for many individuals, their lifestyle is, not conducive to kind of maintaining decent levels of testosterone. If they're the wrong side of 40 and they're overweight, they're stressed, they don't get enough sleep, they don't exercise enough, they eat shit food. There's a lot you can do there to kind of improve the various variables that will influence testosterone. If you have kind of optimized all those areas and testosterone is still low, I am, a testosteronista. So, I would encourage men to, have their levels checked. And, this is what I've introduced at Third Space, where we have kind of, blood testing, where we have private nurses come in, to make it a more kind of seamless experience for our clients. And not that I recommend this to clients, but if an individual did have low testosterone and was kind of experiencing some of the kind of side effects as a kind of result of that, and they'd tried to optimize all those kind of lifestyle variables, and they still weren't able to really kind of nudge their testosterone up, then yeah, I would consider going down the route of TRT, but not to a super physiological level, because the amount of muscle you'll be able to build and how strong you are secondary really to the kind of benefits of what testosterone does for a man, in my opinion. That's cool that you can build muscle and you can stronger, but actually being kind of more alert, being more motivated, being more energized, having a high libido, those are the kind of benefits of testosterone that I would kind of praise above how
Yeah,
much.
yeah, and I suppose like most things, there's use and abuse, right? If you're in the super physiological range, and it's to the extent. we know categorically professional bodybuilders, other sports, and powerlifters, for example, the extremes they take that to in terms of dosage, which I'm always torn with. So we have
Torn in
this,
what sense?
pardon?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say torn in what sense, but presumably
Yeah,
both.
in terms of transparency, right? So there's more transparency, which is great. There are people, there are bodybuilders, there are powerlifters, there are other athletes saying, "Look, I'm an assisted athlete. I compete in a non-tested federation." Fine. I feel like we need to know that so we can manage other people's expectations, especially when we compare ourselves to them, see the incredible feats they're achieving. But I think there is a line in which it actually becomes unethical and is not responsible in any shape or form, because you'll often see bodybuilders, for example, that will share, yes, I'm taking additional hormonal support and these are the doses that I'm taking at what intervals, how much, etc., etc., etc. So no matter how much they caveat that with, this is for me, this is what I do, and I'm not suggesting that to anyone else. Social media and the nature of it means probably somewhere there's a 15-year-old boy who stepped into a gym for the first time. There is someone selling not what the professional athletes are getting hold of, which may be pharmaceutical grade, but something I don't know where they get it from, but of like recreational drugs almost, is you don't actually know what you'd be buying. And a 50-year-old who's going in, getting that, and just dosing themselves essentially with what their favourite bodybuilder is. And that's the part I don't get on board. And I don't know what the answer to that is, because we want some transparency.
If you had to choose, would you, and I do see your point, would you want that kind of transparency, as in I'm not going to pretend I'm natural? Because I've been on courses, and I'm not going to name names, obviously.
Mm,
They're talking about work ethic and training splits and various other things, their nutrition and how disciplined they are, and I'm thinking, but you're
yeah,
clearly on gear,
sure.
right? Which and there was another cool study that kind of looked at kind of testosterone, and that, testosterone is actually, I suppose, relatively mild compared to what some of these guys are taking.
Yeah, it's not just
And
testosterone, right? That,
and they had these four cohorts, and kind of long story short, the individuals who, so they had people who were exercising and not taking gear, people that were exercising and taking gear, people that weren't exercising and taking gear, and the people that weren't exercising, sitting on their sofa watching Netflix and taking testosterone, put on more muscle during that time frame than the people that went to the gym and were kind of
mm,
busting their ass. So if people are, and people do, I think the norm has been that people just pretend they're not taking gear and they're going to deny it, and they have these incredible physiques which are kind of beyond the realm of an unassisted individual,
mm.
even good
Well,
genetic.
also within that, they're objectifying themselves and they're using their bodies as a sales pitch without being disclosing that. So when you're saying, buy my, I don't know, like 16-week program and you can look just like me, just follow my diet, just follow my training routine, and not disclosing that again, I feel that's not misinformation, that's disinformation. That's, I'm deliberately deceiving you by missing out these details on the hope and whim that I'm going to inspire you so much, you're going to give me your money, basically. So I think,
Yeah.
to answer your
So
question, is I would want the transparency. Sorry.
yeah, do we go down that? Do we go down that route where people are like honest? Where is it? Like Denmark, I think, where you have to, where if you touch up photos on
Yeah, yeah,
social
yeah. I've seen it's in France, isn't it? It's France as well.
media,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
influencers have to declare that they do that.
say that, a little kind of disclaimer, like hashtag ad, hashtag gear,
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the tag that would ever float.
or do we risk? Because you're right, absolutely right. There will be kids that will just be like, that's what I
Yeah,
have to do.
yeah. Much the same as I think there's a filter for certain images and certain things. Like there's always going to be a dark web, and however people access that to get whatever they need. But to make it so accessible that you can go on your favorite bodybuilders Instagram page essentially and find out their stack that they take. I don't, the transparency, yes, in my opinion, this is just my feeling at the moment. And by the way, I'm quite happy to change that if someone presents me with something that convinces me otherwise. But transparency, yes, in terms of, by the way, I take other things. transparency in the sense of this is how much I take and this is what I take. I don't
Yeah,
think we need to know that. You know,
I think we just need to go hashtag. Excuse me, hashtag assisted. I mean, I'm joking here, but I don't think it needs the
yeah,
details, right? I'm assisted. This is what we do.
yeah. This is how I make my money.
Assisted. What do you think of?
But by the
I
way,
mean, maybe,
sorry, I was going to say, by the way, there is no judgment on this at all because I know men that are on TRT. I also know men that use other, hormonal support for their sport or just generally recreationally. And there's no judgment on that. It's a very personal decision. But I just think when we're talking about education and communication online, I do think there is an ethical responsibility to disclose certain information, but also withhold certain information as well.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I was just thinking whether I was going a bit far on this one, but I'm just going to go with it anyway. I saw something that kind of made me chuckle the other day on a magazine that posted something on social media about a Marvel superhero actor's physique and the resistance band workout that they did to get this,
Yeah,
and I thought that is ridiculous,
yeah.
in my opinion. The level of kind of dishonesty that at the very least, you're going to be in a bodybuilding gym, using machines. You did not get
No one built
arms
those muscles with
using
resistance bands.
a resistance band. So a resistance band and a chicken and broccoli, didn't
Yeah.
didn't cut
I mean, if you think that's as controversial as you can make it, you obviously haven't listened to this podcast before.
it. Right. Okay.
No, because I was just gonna say, like, outright, I think when it comes to, so we can acknowledge that certain figures just do what they do, even if they don't up to it. I mean, for Dwayne Johnson to carry that much muscle on his physique as a man approaching 50, is he 50? Must be near on 50. The older you get, there comes more and more physiological risk with just more mass, regardless of whether that mass is adipose tissue or fat mass. So he is at greater risk of health implications, but also it's pretty much impossible to add the muscle to his physique and carry that around day to day without assistance. And that's not a slight on him. I have huge admiration for him and his movies, what he's achieved, but that's just what it is, right? We can acknowledge that's what it is. But what I do echo is what you're saying is the likes of Chris Hemsworth, for example,
That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
has an app which is based around bodyweight movements, banded movements, tiny little dumbbell movements. Essentially, where the underlying message is you can build a body like Thor if you invest in my app, if you invest in my bands or my light dumbbells, which I think is hugely misleading. And well, that's the nicest way I can say it. I think that's not just misleading. I think that's capitalizing on people's vulnerabilities. That's capitalizing on their insecurities. And I think he has just sold the app for like millions and millions.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's pretty shitty, isn't it? Because
that is shitty. Shitty is the perfect word for it.
and then if you think about who his audience is as Thor,
Kids.
superhero. So yeah, you're hoodwinking these kids into
Hmm.
thinking by like resistance bands.
Yeah. I mean,
You're
like,
gonna
you remove the app from that, the fact that he's selling an app or he's selling exercise equipment, it is what it is. But I think, yeah, what makes that more sinister, as you say, is hoodwinking the audience.
yeah,
That's my gut feeling on that. Because I think when we talk about, and we can talk about the misgivings of all the information that I think about testosterone boosting supplements on the market, and people aren't aware that you have your genetic predisposition, you have your natural ranges of testosterone you'll likely end up in over your lifespan, but boosting it above that isn't actually physiologically possible without the external introduction of it.
yeah. I mean, a lot of that stuff I think really is like penis enlargement pills, right? It's just not real. It's just not going to do what you're trying, what you want it to kind of.
Why did you look
Uh,
at me dead in the eyes when you said that?
We kind of, we like this idea of I'm going to be able to build loads of muscle and, I'm going to be this, sexual athlete because my testosterone is going to be like through the roof. These supplements don't do that for you. If you do want like that kind of that surge in testosterone, we're going down the route of the kind of the chat, the paragraph we've just discussed. So I guess the point I was trying to make is, these marketing companies are trying to appeal to our insecurities or men's insecurities by kind of marketing these supplements that are going to do this thing for them, which they kind of don't.
Yeah.
It's just, I suppose, the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, no, the reward factors, and as you say, like,
Is a an emotionally driven thing, subject, hormone. It's not like thyroid or ghrelin, and I'm not that kind of invested in that.
oh,
Whereas I think
yeah, I mean, it's
fuels to our idea of ourselves.
yeah,
You
what
know,
masculinity is, a primitive reptilian
there you
brain.
go, masculinity or lack of it.
Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned penis size, you mentioned erectile dysfunction, you mentioned hairlines, you mentioned, you know, all of these other things that make men think they're physically embodying masculinity to a certain level, which the why the appeal of adding muscle is so up there and having low levels of body fat. I'm hugely aware of time, and I don't want to steal much more of yours. In terms of lifestyle factors, so we know the bare basics, if you like. You know, the sleep, rest, nourishing your body, exercising, engaging in lifting, resistance, etc. On the remaining, I say remaining, keeping your testosterone within as high as possible within your natural ranges. Is there anything you've stumbled across on the research which you think would be quite surprising for people to hear? Whether it's a certain food, a certain ingredient, a certain mode of training.
no, not really,
That's
and I think
cool.
that's
That was the answer I thought you was going to say.
because that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Like, you want me to say, well, Dan, like, here's this supplement I found that.
I actually definitely don't. I think that's really
Yeah,
refreshing for people
but
to
I
hear.
mean, like, the industry, the world wants
Yeah.
a silver bullet. No, I mean, it's down to, so take myself as an example. Um, I get it. I get it less now. I did, a few years ago when I first kind of started working with coaches, educating coaches, where people would kind of be asking me about these kind of niche supplements that they kind of heard about. But for me personally, the biggest testosterone booster, if you like, or muscle booster, would be to get more sleep, right? And it's
Mm,
it's pretty basic,
yeah.
right? Get some sleep, manage your stress, eat a decent diet, a high fat diet, lift weights, don't do a marathon, don't do excessive amounts of cardio.
Mm,
And it's those things, it's taking things back to basics and looking at kind of optimizing all those
yeah.
all those things.
For the marathon runners out there, by the way, we're not suggesting like your testosterone levels are going to drop through the floor.
Yeah, well, they tend to be lower though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's I guess it's that whole cortisol conundrum, isn't it? It's like, it's typically thought of as a negative. We need some cortisol. It's that acute stress, which is important for adaptation, but it's the prolonged chronic. So whether that be emotional, physical, or just your hobby, if you like, which is long distance running, is going to have implications longer term, I think. But it's, yeah, finding the mix of acute and chronic. Chronic being the not so favourable, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything you kind of want to mention? If anyone wants to find out more information, mate, where can they go to hear more about you?
Well, I mean, yeah, this has got a broad reach. So if you want to kind of find out more about non-testosterone stuff that I've kind of been delving into of late, so basically my kind of PhD research, I've just created a course for Pure Gym on coaching behavior change. So if you're a
Oh,
Pure Gym
amazing.
trainer, you can jump on that app. So myself and my buddy Mark, who works at Pure Gym, we created this active IQ accredited course on coaching behavior change. So some of the stuff we touched on at the beginning. What else? Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm going to be doing some kind of research soon, so I'll be looking at kind of ways I can kind of access or kind of work with coaches. So I guess check in on my Instagram, Jason Jackson PT.
The IG, which I'll put in the show notes anyway. But thank you, mate. I really appreciate your time. And to the avid listener, I think more than just my mum listens to this, hopefully. If you do like it, please do share it. Drop us a review as well. I'm always happy to listen to constructive feedback. If you hate it, keep that to yourself. But until next time, thanks, mate.
Nice one.
Hello, welcome to another episode. We've gone in with fuck it, let's just go as the mentality of today. And yeah, thanks, Jason, for joining us. Long time, mate. It's been a while. Was it 2014? Was